Our next session tackles one of the biggest priorities in modern construction, protecting your data and staying compliant. Allison Pisarchik from Echelon brings years of cloud and cybersecurity experience, helping organizations manage risk while building smarter. Please welcome Allison.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our presentation today, Building Secure Cybersecurity in the Construction Industry. My name is Allison, and I'm a manager at Echelon Risk and Cyber. We primarily focus on governance risk compliance, as well as defensive security, offensive security, and vCISO work. Today, I'm representing the organization talking through some substantial risks that are threatening the construction space. So to start out for the agenda, we're going to cover some cybersecurity best practices, some construction-specific risks, compliance in construction, and then construction trends. We'll end with the closeout. So to start out here, we always like to highlight that security is imperative in construction, given that there is sensitive data, spans designs, contracts, employee information, and vendor details as well. There are increasing regulatory requirements, which we'll touch on later in the presentation, really highlighting and focusing on CMMC. There are additionally compliance pressures coming in. We like to think of construction as it has a lot of high stakes. So project delays can equal financial loss, can equal revenue loss, as well as your employees getting disgruntled or messed up projects. Next, I wanted to highlight some typical best practices. This is a quick list just to give you a reference, but we always recommend that any construction industry company is conducting risk assessments regularly. Additionally, those gap analysis pieces are imperative, always circling back to that annually at minimum. So if it's not documented, that probably means it's not happening. But if it is happening, it's not documented, that's the time to fix it. Those yearly checks are the time to check in with your cybersecurity program, figure out what has been the progress since last year. Let's reflect on what we've done better since the last one, as well as decide, do we need more tooling, more budget, or maybe additional compliance teams. Additionally, we always look to implement robust access controls and authentication. Given the world of construction, sometimes we see people are on site and there are different devices in play, and that's where a lot of those access controls can fall under the radar. So making sure there's no shadow IT in your environment, and additionally reviewing your access controls regularly. So if you have a contractor on site, when is their last day, and is that access automatically revoked? Who's auditing that? How often are you relooking at whoever has access to your network and what that level is? Additionally, training is always the forefront of cybersecurity. We can't expect people to have a cyber-focused mindset just coming into their normal day-to-day job, and that's the point of cybersecurity and awareness training. I always find it most beneficial to build out a cybersecurity and awareness training program that is specific to a job role. So for example, if you're looking at a large organization, we want HR training specifically because they deal with different risks than, say, your contractors on site will deal with. It really is important to make cybersecurity training specific so that people are buying into it and they don't think this is just the generalized PowerPoint deck I see once a year. But really, this is real risks that are impacting me or could come across my desks. Additionally, monitoring any third-party vendors and integrating security into contracts. I do a lot of assessment work, and mostly I'm asking people, okay, you have 3 vendors that are your bread and butter here, and they're most important. If they had a cyber incident, would they have to notify you? If you had a cyber incident, would you have to notify them? And that is really something that we always say, think through it now. If you need to go back and revise that contract language, that's something you can do. Additionally, if you want to add in additional clauses, et cetera, you want to work with your legal team to determine what is the best way to cover yourself, as well as ensure that if you have a vendor that is critical to your environment or connected to your network, they have to notify you if they ever do have a possible outage or incident. And lastly, leveraging tools for real-time monitoring and incident response. The more tooling you have isn't necessarily the better, but really using the most out of the tooling that you have in your environment will get you the best results. It may be the case that you want to outsource through a third party, and that's always something that we see people do. They will have an incident response team on retainer. They will have a managed SOC or a managed service provider that handles all of their alerts, triages, managed SIM. There are a lot of different flavors to it, but figuring out what is the right direction for your organization. Do you want to invest in tooling and staffing? Do you want to outsource tooling and staffing? Do you want to maybe do a hybrid of the both? So figuring out what is the best fit for you and what kind of tools you already have, and figure out if there's a different way to leverage them. A lot of the times people will say, oh, there's 3 more features that we have on this tool that we're paying $100,000 for, but we just don't have time to configure them at this time. So therefore, that tells me maybe that tooling is a little too expensive, and maybe I would try to scale that back and figure out what to do with your headcount. I'll move over now to unique risk in construction and capital projects. We typically see that organizations in construction have complex multi-party ecosystems. So you have your partners that you're working with, you have your own environment, you have contractors that can be brought in. That brings a lot of additional security footprint into the universe. So you want to make sure that whoever you are working with, like I stated before, you have those contracts in place and recognize that the more footprint you have, the bigger risk there is. There's also the high volume of data exchange across multiple platforms and sites. You are transmitting a lot of data, sometimes maybe sensitive, sometimes maybe only applying to one part of the organization. So ensuring that those access controls are locked down. Additionally, construction is typically utilizing a lot of remote access, IoT devices, and connected machinery, creating new attack surfaces. So understanding what does that look like to your organization, how many IoT devices you have, what are they connecting to, who is remoting into your environment, and what kind of contractor access is being given. These are all just considerations that you want to have. And lastly, definitely a hot topic at the moment, insider risk and third-party vulnerabilities. So understanding, if your third party is compromised, or maybe a third party has full access to your network, understanding what are those dependencies and how would you flag them. Going back to the insider risk piece too, it's not always a malicious insider. I know that's what people's minds typically go to, but it could be somebody that overshared their permissions, or maybe wrote their name down on a notepad next to their desk, or maybe granted access to somebody, or tried to do something nice and respond to an email, but it was actually a fake one. We always like to think, we're going into it, trust but verify. We're hoping that this person is who they say they are, or that they're not doing anything malicious against the organization, but there should be a workflow and process to investigate. That it should come across from your legal team, your HR team, as well as your security team to figure out, oh, we have a suspected insider. What does that workflow look like? Additionally, hiring somebody from a possible threat actor group has been prominent in the news recently. So understanding that the more vendors, third party, and staff that you bring in, the more risk there is. And there's always that human error, but trying to arm your staff with the most cybersecurity training of what to look out for. Specifically, your coworker mentions, I just got a brand new Ferrari, and I also just got a brand new mansion, and I'm also quitting tomorrow. Those are things that you might want to take off as a red flag. And it doesn't necessarily mean something bad, but having a workflow to investigate it puts you in a better spot than if you were just trying to call the person yourself and investigate. And moving over to the top 5 threats in construction industry. So ransomware attacks are extremely prominent across the whole cyber threat landscape. We do see that the malicious software is encrypting companies' data, demanding payment for decryption. Some organizations have a strict don't pay policy. Some organizations say, we'll see it when it comes, or we'll decide in the moment. So really strategize, what is your approach there? Do you want to have a ransomware negotiation playbook? Do you want to already have things in place to call a retainer to support you during this time? But just understanding this is a relevant threat for the construction industry. Next, we have business email compromise. So fake emails impersonating executives, partners, et cetera, to deceive employees into transferring funds or revealing confidential information. So you may receive an email from a vendor saying, you're past due on payment. This was due 3 weeks ago. Please click this link to quickly submit it before close. They push that urgency on you, and therefore, allow you to log in, maybe provide your credentials, but at the bare minimum, wire them money. We also see phishing attacks. So deceptive communications designed to trick individuals. This one's definitely most known, I would say, for people not in the cyber industry. Everyone's received something on their phone that is a sketchy text message. We call that smishing, or maybe a strange voicemail. We call that phishing. But yes, receiving any kind of those communications that are out of the ordinary, that are from a malicious threat actor, would fall under the phishing attack category. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's just human error. So there's not too much that we could do to prevent it, besides having those tools and alerting in place. Additionally, as we were touching on before, insider threat, super prevalent right now, specifically with folks hiring people out of North Korea to the organization and having them embedded into the company. So making sure that when people are resetting their devices, or maybe even adding new devices to their account, resetting passwords, et cetera, you're doing a lot of authentication checks. You want to verify that the person that is on the other side of that screen is really them. That's one way to make sure that you're verifying your users. But additionally, sometimes insider risk is happening and you just need to know how to alert for it. So is somebody accessing a database they don't normally go to, it's outside of their job functions? Has somebody tried to been pushing on someone to add them to a new file that they usually don't need? These are all things that should flag in your head and are possible insiders. I know I previously touched on it, but having that workflow already done is going to save you a lot of headache later, especially with the sensitivity of investigating a possible employee, making sure that you really are confident what you have and you're working through a documented plan. Make sure that you're covering your own organization, as well as giving the person that is at your organization, your employee, the opportunity to provide evidence and talk through what happened. And lastly, here we have supply chain attacks. So exploiting any kind of vulnerabilities in third-party vendors or partners to infiltrate your network. So we were chatting through that before. This would be, maybe your most critical vendor gets attacked and then it therefore infiltrates your network. The supply chain attacks have been very hot right now. And a lot of the times it's relying on the third party picking up the phone, calling you as soon as they see something going awry. And that really does depend on the relationships you have. Next up, we're going to walk through some threats to the construction sector. So here are just two profiles of some notable groups that have targeted construction in the past. Sometimes it's a little fun to understand a little bit more about the threat groups that are performing these actions to get a peek behind the curtain there. So we have Black Tech here, overview of their recent campaign as they started to become active in 2013. They have targeted sectors including media and construction, engineering, electronics, and they really have been focusing on Taiwan, Japan, the US, and China. Additionally, we have Clop, very well known, a Russian-speaking ransomware gang known for multi-level extortion techniques and global malware disruption. They like to hit organizations and hit them hard. So they have a lot of large-scale phishing campaigns and sophisticated malware that does infiltrate networks and demand ransom from there. You may know them from in 2023. They had the exploited zero-day vulnerability in the Move It transfer, and a lot of organizations were impacted by this. It was definitely talk of the town for a bit, and they were the ones to blame. And here I wanted to move into the compliance piece of today's presentation. So compliance is a baseline, not just a checkbox. It's frustrating when as a consultant, I'll meet with clients and I'll say, why are you doing this? And they're like, well, our insurance provider is making us, or something like that. And you really need to understand this isn't just something you do once and you put it in a drawer. This is constant. Your compliance to your regulatory requirements, to your stakeholders, to your executive board, to your constituents, your people. You always need to keep that top of mind. So compliance is not just we did it and it's done. It is a regular re-review of ensuring that you are aligning with best practices as well as any kind of regulatory requirements. Demonstrating strong security practices does differentiate your organization. So while you're bidding on new contracts or talking through possible new proposals with people, saying, hey, we're SOC 2 certified, or we have XYZ security controls in place already. And we have a lot of good partnerships with cyber programs, or we do regular audits, whatever that may be, that will give your people peace of mind of what they're buying into. I know we just talked about that third-party compromise piece, and obviously you're thinking of it in your end of what if a contractor gets compromised and then your network's compromised. But always remember that other organizations are thinking of it the same way. So if they're bringing you in, if they're giving you access to their network, they also want to ensure that you have strong cybersecurity practices. Additionally, proactive security mitigates legal and financial risks. It's very helpful to be able to understand what does cybersecurity risks mean to your organization, and is there a risk register in place, as well as what is the financial impact of those risks. So you could have financial impact in the terms of we lose $200,000 a day for every day that this application's down, or we lost 7 contracts because people heard that we had a security outage and they pulled them. So understanding what are the financial risks that a threat actor could pose to your organization, documenting them, and then understanding thresholds. When do you want to escalate? When do you want to bring other people in for support? As well as when do you want to send reports up to management and leadership to alert them of what's going on? And lastly, enhancing the client confidence and supports timely on-budget project delivery. So we have had multiple engagements where I'll be working with the client to deliver something and they get hacked. They have something go down, they're unable to deliver, they're not able to join the calls, they're troubleshooting on their end, et cetera. We don't want a cybersecurity incident to be the reason why your projects are not able to complete on time. And the best way to mitigate that is putting the proper controls and audit and visibility into place prior. Next, I'll walk through the CMMC Spotlight. So this is a big compliance framework that has recently come out in the last few years, but that is specifically definitely going to impact construction. So construction companies that are handling any kind of CUI or working on DoD projects must meet specific cybersecurity standards. There are 5 maturity levels that are within CMMC. So there's basic cyber hygiene level 1, and then there's that advanced proactive cybersecurity level 5. I always say if you're getting a 5, that means you're writing the book on it. We really want clients to figure out what is the right level for them and make sure that they're hitting every requirement that's put in front of them from CMMC to ensure that they don't miss out on any bids. I previously, at my last organization, saw a company who desperately needed to get CMMC certified, and they were so stressed over it because they had a DoD project they were bidding on. And they would not be able to bid on the contract unless this was already handled. So waiting until the last minute with that piece really did bite them in the end, and they were rushing through it. And it obviously created a lot of alarm, a lot of stress, and a lot of late night calls. So being able to prevent that and getting this handled proactively would be your best option. Sometimes subcontractors may be required to demonstrate compliance at a certain level to remain eligible for DoD contracts as well. So I always just want to highlight that it's not just large organizations. And here I just wanted to touch on a bit of what my organization's approach to CMMC 2.0 compliance is. So we like to understand what your mission is, what data you have, and what's the sensitivity of it, and then what kind of DoD contract exposure you have in place. Who specifically are you working with? What are projects that you're looking to get into? And then having our approach align with compliance with real business risks, ensuring that every control adds measurable value and protection where it does matter the most. We use methodology grounded in NIST Special Publication 800-171 and 800-172, which is the core of CMMC 2.0. Additionally, we like to have it integrated, not isolated. So we embed these requirements into your existing GRC, cybersecurity, IT ops programs. So we're not looking to create a CMMC policy. We're looking to bake CMMC controls and considerations into your whole cyber landscape. It needs to be a constant thought in the back of people's brain. It needs to constantly be being reviewed to ensure that you keep that level of compliance. And pretty much a perfect leeway here is the continuous and auditable actions. So we don't want you to have that one-time certification. It is a living program. So creating that plan of action and milestones, making sure that you have those next steps already in place is imperative to continue the CMMC compliance journey. Here I have emerging trends in the construction technology field. So tech is impacting construction like never before. There are real and practical applications for modernizing your current processes. Although these cutting edge technologies in construction are changing how the industry works, it also means that future cybersecurity programs or projects need to be put in place. So some of the current trends that we see of construction technology is cloud and mobile technology, AI, of course, robotics, drones, connected homes, smart buildings. So understanding, what are these new technology tools that you're going to utilize in the future, and what does that footprint look like? And here, building off of that, the attack surface, right? So attack surface expansion leads to additional exposure. The more technological advancements that you have as an organization will have one common denominator, a bigger attack surface. So figuring out what does that mean to you? There's some risks you might want to accept. There's some that you might want to mitigate, and there's some you might want to offload. But figuring out where do you lean in there? And attack surface is the sum of all of your possible security risk exposures put together. So all technology is connected to the corporate network directly, virtually, or through cloud platforms, significantly increasing your points of entry. A lot of the times I will ask clients, show me your network map, show me how everything's interconnected, and it's silent on the call because people don't put a huge thought into it, or maybe it's an engineer that puts something together that they don't operate regularly. But really do focus in on figuring out what are the tools we're using, what are the risks with those tools, what are they connecting to, how much do we know about them, how are we validating that this is the right tool or that people aren't downloading unsupported software. These are all areas that would increase your attack surface. And here I have that attacks are happening faster than ever. So average days from compromise to exfiltration used to be 9 days of somebody getting compromised and then data removed from their environment. Now it is hours. It is truly happening in a matter of seconds. It depends what the threat actor's mission is. Do they want to sit quietly, do recon? Do they want to immediately smash and grab, pull everything out? But you don't have as much time as you did in the past to address this. On industry average, it takes about 6 days to remediate a cyber incident, but most regulations have a window of 2 to 4 days to disclose those cyber incidents. So work with your legal team, come up with a list of the regulatory requirements that are applicable to your construction company, and ensure that you know those timelines ahead of time. Make sure you have a documented list of, if we have an incident, this is who I call at this time, or once I say this word, then it changes. And here we have our key takeaways and discussion. So just want to make sure that we're looping back that security is integral to modern construction and capital projects. Collaboration across your stakeholders is essential for the effective protection of your organization. Cyber compliance is more important than ever. If you take one thing away from this is talk to somebody about cybersecurity today. Talk to somebody about a control that they haven't thought of, a process that could be improved, or just baseline getting more education on the table. Investing in security and compliance projects both protect your people and your projects. So we want to protect your bottom line. We don't want you to have, like I said before, that large incident that takes you out of the game, as well as we don't want to have all of your employees sitting on their hands, unable to work one day because there's an outage. Being proactive and putting measures in place now will help you in the long run. Common saying in cybersecurity, you fight how you train. So put that training in process. Figure out, do you want more tabletop exercises? Do you want more assessments? Do you want more purple teams, audits, whatever that may be? But create a cyber roadmap that best fits your organization. And that'll be it for today.
Allison, that was fantastic. Thanks so much. We do have some questions. We're going to jump right into Q&A if that's okay.
Perfect. Absolutely.
All right. Question number 1. What workflow would you recommend to investigate cybersecurity incidents?
Great question. So I would say to start out, always basing that workflow, whatever it may be, within an actual regulatory or best practice body. So that would be probably NIST, I would usually recommend, and following their different phases of the incident response process. So going through, you're going to have, starting out with preparation, detective analysis, going through containment, eradication, recovery, et cetera, and defining a plan that works for your organization. So a lot of the times your workflow is going to look a lot different than a very large organization or a very small one. Figuring out who are those key players and documenting it in an incident response plan is the most critical, and having a repeatable process. So while defining a workflow is really important, I would usually say you could outsource that by going to the NIST website, going to ISO, finding out what works best for your org, but really documenting it is what's most critical. A lot of organizations will say, well, this person's been with us for 10 years. They already know how to do everything. And that's what we want to prevent. If that person, wins the lottery tomorrow, we want to make sure everything is well documented and that workflow is repeatable.
Okay.
So really just starting out with NIST would be your best go for there.
Well, you partially answered my next question. I was going to ask, is there a good place where people can go to find this NIST recommendation? You said their website. Anything more specific, or is that a good enough hint to get them started?
Yeah, so there's the NIST website. CrowdStrike also has great available resources, but for NIST specifically, they have their computer security incident handling guide. I usually point clients in that direction as, the first stopping point. as well as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF 2.0. Those provide a lot of those baseline controls that we would expect to see out of a cybersecurity organization. And it's always helpful to have an auditor come in and assess you, or an assessor come in and assess you against NIST, but really utilizing, what does good look like for a cybersecurity org or for a program, and comparing that to what NIST recommends.
And you mentioned earlier CMMC requirements, and those are basically based on NIST, as are Kahua's FedRAMP requirements. The same NIST standards apply or baked into those things.
Exactly, yes. So really sticking with one body and following that through, I find very helpful. Makes it a little less confusing for organizations. So specifically with NIST 800-171 for the CMMC piece, as you mentioned, FedRAMP as well, really will all boil up into the same framework.
Excellent. Okay, next question. How often do you recommend that I have my employees undergo cybersecurity trainings?
Yeah, so I would say at a baseline, new hire is always adamant, make sure you have that in place. And then yearly after that, there are different flavors of cybersecurity training. So you could either send out, phishing campaigns. That would be a part of a cybersecurity program, as well as having employees, complete that manual training that most do yearly basis, as well as departmental training. So if you're building out a cybersecurity program, think through, does the person that works in HR need the same training as the person that works in my finance department? And the answer to that is usually no. A lot of those overarching main policies will hold true. Those best practices are going to be the same across the board, but figure out, you already have your yearly training in place. Is there other ways to dial into your community? Is there other ways to get people to buy into cybersecurity? Cybersecurity training, a lot of the times may go in one ear, out the other. I don't think that's true if you're following up a lot. So if you're sending out those reminders and keeping cyber at the forefront of people's brains, I never expect someone, in the finance department to only be thinking, is this safe? Is this secure? But by sending out those reminders, as well as that continuous education, it can be really helpful to keep it at the top of their minds.
I've read that the phishing campaigns are one of the most effective ways to do that. If you do those internally, your internal audience is reminded that someone's looking all the time, paying attention, and it provides the IT infrastructure, the IT and security staff, a means of going to those folks that need more training, more encouragement, more information. So, and an earlier, go ahead.
When you're building out that training, making sure that you're having a way to hold people accountable. So like you said, following up with the employees that are continuously failing it. I do a lot of assessments in my line of work, and I always ask people, what happens if the same person keeps failing? Sometimes it's, their manager gets notified. Sometimes it's, they get locked out of their email for a day. There's different varying ways that organizations can, hold accountability there, but really making sure that it is something that folks are, like you said, thinking, someone's looking over my shoulder for this.
Well, the final is not a question, but it'd give you a chance to comment. In an earlier session today on Build Forward, I was reminded by Kahua founder Brian Moore when I said that Kahua achieved FedRAMP authorization about 4 years ago. While that is true that we did achieve our first, it was our first notice of authorization and certification, Brian pointed out that that's not something you achieve once. That's something you achieve every day, that it has to be forefront, keeping our clients and our country's data as secure as possible. It's not something we do one time and we check it off our list. It's something that we address every day. We are attacked every day. We are fighting every day to prevent those attacks. So it echoes what you just said about the more often we can put this in front of our constituents and our own internal audience, the better off we are.
That's a fantastic point. That definitely holds true. And I believe I touched on that in my presentation as well, that this isn't just a one-time certification. It needs to be constant, baked into your environment and baked into your people.
Allison, we can't thank you enough for being part of Build Forward today. We're going to let the folks go. They've got to select their next topic. Thanks for being part of this, and thanks to the audience for hanging in there with us.
Yeah, pleasure speaking with you all. Hope you have a wonderful day.